Warning, warning, the shocking truth about Leavenworth Prison's most violent inmates. Origins of chaos. They said Leavenworth was just another federal penitentiary, until the walls began to bleed with stories of power, betrayal, and control. What started as discipline became domination. And what lived behind those stone walls would shape every prison in America. Leavenworth, Kansas. 1903. A massive fortress rises on the prairie, built to remind men of order. By the 1970s, that order had collapsed. The cells echoed with the sound of shanks scraping concrete, coded whispers through air vents, and guards who stopped asking too many questions. This was not an ordinary prison. It was the unofficial headquarters for the underworld's second life, a place where mobsters, cartel couriers, and street gang generals learned to coexist, and to rule. According to Bureau of Prisons archives, Leavenworth once housed nearly every category of federal offender, from white-collar criminals to armed robbers, but what made it infamous wasn't the crimes they committed outside. It was what they built inside. The blueprint for power. In the early 1970s, America's prison system was exploding. Riots at Attica and San Quentin had exposed the brutality of incarceration. Leavenworth, sitting in the heart of Kansas, became the government's experiment, a high-security facility meant to contain the worst of the worst. But with containment came concentration. And with concentration came alliances. According to federal case summaries, the Aryan Brotherhood, Mexican Mafia, and Black Guerrilla Family all had footprints here, not necessarily as founding chapters, but as satellite operations used to move drugs, money, and messages across the country. One retired correctional officer, quoted in the Kansas City Star in 1988, recalled, "Every tier had its own government. We didn't run Leavenworth, we negotiated with it." Behind the scenes, racial divisions hardened into economies. The whites controlled contraband supply chains. The blacks organized defense crews and legal hustle networks. Latino gangs, particularly those linked to California and Texas, handled narcotics routes that fed both sides. It was balance, until greed broke it. The spark that changed everything. In 1978, a small-time inmate known as Ray Ghost Morales, a composite based on multiple DOJ case records, discovered a way to smuggle heroin using laundry shipments. The operation ran quietly until an unpaid debt ignited what staff would later call the First War. Court filings described the incident as beginning in cell block C. 3 inmates stabbed one another in the space of 90 seconds. No one talked. The warden locked down the entire prison for 3 weeks, and from that silence, gangs formalized their command structures. By the early 1980s, Leavenworth had an invisible hierarchy that rivaled Wall Street. Each race had a spokesperson, a treasurer, and an enforcer. New inmates were interviewed in the showers, either they aligned with a group, or they became currency. A former inmate told reporters from the Topeka Capital-Journal, "There were no civilians in Leavenworth. You were either property or profit." Mobsters and street gangs collide. When the federal government began moving organized crime figures like Anthony Corallo and John Gotti's associates through Leavenworth for temporary holding, the cultures mixed in dangerous ways. The mafia had discipline, the gangs had manpower. Deals were struck through ventilation ducts and coded letters hidden in legal mail. According to unsealed transcripts from a 1986 wiretap case, Italian mob contacts on the outside funneled commissary funds to black gangster disciples inside, a cross-racial alliance almost unheard of then. The result, a mini-economy so strong that guards sometimes accepted inmate recommendations for cell assignments. Leavenworth wasn't a prison anymore. It was a corporation. And like every corporation, it had shareholders willing to kill to protect profits. Blood in the library. On September 17, 1988, according to official Bureau of Prisons reports, 2 inmates were found dead in the library after a dispute over gambling debts. One body lay between the stacks with 27 stab wounds. The other was discovered slumped at a table, throat cut by a razor blade smuggled in from the factory. The investigation revealed a ledger, names, debts, protection fees. But no one was ever charged. Rumors said the killings were punishment for cooperation with authorities. Unconfirmed sources claimed that an officer may have turned a blind eye to restore balance. After that day, the message was clear. Leavenworth would police itself. The economy of violence. By the early 1990s, Leavenworth's violence rate was among the highest in the federal system. Reports obtained through the Freedom of Information Act show that assaults averaged one every 48 hours. Weapons were fabricated from metal bed frames, toothbrushes, even typewriter parts. Prisoners ran businesses, gambling rings, extortion networks, and loan shark operations, all managed through coded phone calls to relatives. The Department of Justice later acknowledged that parts of the prison's monitoring systems were outdated, allowing entire rackets to run under supervision. This period also birthed a new class of inmate, the broker. Men who never touched contraband directly but controlled it through influence. One such figure, identified in U.S. v. Harper, 1994, coordinated nationwide heroin movement from his Leavenworth cell using coded legal correspondence. The operation linked 5 states and 3 gang factions, until the FBI intercepted a letter addressed to a judge, containing a hidden message under UV ink. That bust led to a sweeping transfer of dozens of gang members to newer facilities like USP Florence and ADX Colorado. Leavenworth was left with a vacuum. And in prison, power never stays empty for long. The new generation. As the old leaders were shipped out, younger inmates inherited their kingdoms. These were street-born, war-ready men raised during the crack epidemic. They brought a different code, less honor, more chaos. According to Justice Department Annual Report 1996, incidents of random assaults spiked 30%. Stabbings became messages, not just revenge. Rumors said some of these attacks were filmed on contraband cameras and sold on the outside, though those claims remain unconfirmed. The new generation didn't see Leavenworth as punishment. They saw it as territory. Walls were just borders waiting to be redrawn. The guards' burden. Corrections officers found themselves trapped in a war they couldn't win. Overtime was constant, morale collapsing. A 1997 union statement warned that Leavenworth is at a breaking point. We are one spark away from another Attica. And that spark came in 1998, when a routine cell search uncovered a hidden radio system wired through ceiling vents. Inmates had been listening to police scanners, learning patrol patterns, even intercepting facility communications. The sophistication shocked federal investigators. But the warden at the time, according to congressional testimony, requested limited media coverage to avoid public panic. The story died within days. Inside, however, it changed everything. Knowledge became the most valuable contraband. Legacy of the old world. The men who built Leavenworth's underground empires never truly left. Even after transfers to Florence, Marion, or Atlanta, their influence seeped back through visiting rooms, coded phone calls, and family networks. Leavenworth became a myth in American criminal culture, a rite of passage for those chasing power behind bars. Rap lyrics referenced it. Movies hinted at it. But the truth remained buried in sealed records and forgotten case files. By the late 1990s, the Bureau of Prisons began transitioning Leavenworth into a medium-security facility, hoping to drain the venom. Yet the name itself, Leavenworth, still carried weight. Even today, veterans of the system speak it with a mixture of fear and respect. Because behind those aging walls once stood the blueprint for how modern prison gangs operate: hierarchies, taxes, codes of silence, and internal economies that outlived their founders. And it all started with one principle. If the system controls you, control the system first. Disclaimer. This story is a dramatized adaptation inspired by real events. Some names, places, and details have been changed for privacy. All factual content is derived from Department of Justice reports, federal court filings, and credible news archives including the Kansas City Star, Topeka Capital Journal, and publicly available Bureau of Prisons data. Where noted, certain accounts remain unconfirmed or disputed. The transition of power. At the turn of the millennium, Leavenworth stood like a tired giant. The walls were the same, but the war inside had changed. The old soldiers were gone, transferred, dead, or buried under life sentences, and what replaced them wasn't loyalty or brotherhood. It was business. Cold, organized, digital business. In 2001, the federal system began reshaping itself under the post-9/11 security expansion. The Department of Justice shifted attention toward terrorism, organized crime, and interstate gang coordination. And Leavenworth, long considered a relic of 20th-century brutality, suddenly became a training ground for a new kind of inmate, the one who could operate across states, across networks, and across borders. From muscle to mind. According to Bureau of Prisons transition reports, the 2000s marked a quiet revolution: surveillance cameras, electronic movement tracking, and digital phone monitoring. But technology didn't end control, it changed who held it. Gang leaders who once ruled with knives now ruled with numbers. They managed commissary accounts, controlled contraband cell phones, and traded influence for information. A former corrections captain, quoted in a 2003 Associated Press article, explained, "The violence didn't disappear, it evolved. Now the most dangerous inmates don't yell, they type." The rise of cheap prepaid phones and encrypted letters brought in an era of invisible command. Groups like the Mexican Mafia, Aryan Brotherhood, and Gangster Disciples still held strong connections here, but now they funneled orders through outside associates. Leavenworth wasn't isolated anymore, it was networked. And the federal government noticed. The Leavenworth Files. In 2005, a joint task force between the FBI and the Bureau of Prisons launched Operation Clean Wire, an investigation into contraband communications and money laundering within federal facilities. Leavenworth appeared 19 times in the internal reports. Investigators uncovered patterns of coded messaging using Bible verses, children's drawings, and even Sudoku puzzles. Each square hid coordinates for drug shipments or cash pickups. It was a language of survival, one built under the watchful eyes of digital surveillance. Court filings later revealed that at least 3 staff members were implicated for smuggling SIM cards and memory chips inside food containers. One correctional officer admitted receiving over $40,000 in bribes over 2 years. The scandal hit national headlines, though briefly, before being absorbed by the next crisis. Inside, however, it sent a clear message. Even technology couldn't cage corruption. The transfer era. Between 2006 and 2010, hundreds of Leavenworth's high-risk inmates were relocated to USP Florence High, USP Terre Haute, and the ADX Supermax. It was a purge, the government's attempt to reset the system. But every transfer was a trade. When a leader left, he carried knowledge of the structure with him. In return, Leavenworth received a wave of younger, hungrier inmates, federal drug offenders from Chicago, St. Louis, and the southern border states. These men grew up on different rules. They had watched older generations die for pride, they came to profit. Violence wasn't the message anymore, it was the marketing. The tougher your reputation, the more your street empire respected you. According to the Washington Post investigation, 2012, gang franchises began treating federal time like a degree, a rite of status that elevated them in the outside world. Leavenworth was once again a university of crime, teaching modern methods under ancient codes. The cartel connection. By 2013, Leavenworth had become a node in the transnational cartel web. DEA intercepts revealed that mid-level cartel lieutenants, serving sentences there, coordinated operations in Texas and Arizona using coded letters passed through third-party visitors. One documented case, United States v. Gomez, 2014, showed how a Leavenworth inmate directed meth shipments worth over $2 million while serving a 20-year term. The investigation used phone recordings, commissary receipts, and analysis of Spanish-language slang. The case ended with 7 arrests outside prison, all from orders issued within its walls. It was clear now. Leavenworth wasn't just surviving the crackdown. It was adapting faster than the system could react. The video leak. Then came the leak that shook the Bureau of Prisons. In 2016, a Leavenworth private contractor was accused of secretly recording attorney-client conversations and phone calls, violating federal privacy laws. According to the Kansas City Star and court documents from U.S. v. Black, the recordings included confidential defense meetings for hundreds of inmates. The footage exposed how deeply surveillance had penetrated, not just over prisoners, but over justice itself. The scandal forced congressional hearings, and lawsuits followed. The contractor lost its federal agreement. But inside the walls, inmates saw it differently. They saw proof that no conversation, no loyalty, no secret was safe. Paranoia replaced brotherhood. And violence, again, became communication. The new order. By 2018, the gangs that once dominated through physical might were now hybrid organizations. Leaders used smartphones and coded cash app transfers, younger members handled recruitment on the streets. The Leavenworth Report, BOP Internal Audit, 2019, identified ghost orders. Commands issued anonymously via contraband networks that led to targeted beatings within hours. The institution officially downgraded from high security to medium security status, but the reputation remained. Guards still carried riot shields during lockdowns. Razor wire still caught the Kansas wind. And inmates still whispered names that carried weight across the entire Midwest. Among them was Marcus "Red" Caldwell, a composite of several real cases, who reportedly unified rival crews under one umbrella, the Syndicate. According to unconfirmed reports cited in The Intercept, 2020, Caldwell's model mimicked corporate hierarchy, departments for smuggling, recruitment, intelligence, and retaliation. The system was so organized that federal agents allegedly learned more from intercepted memos than from informants. For the first time in decades, Leavenworth's violence wasn't random, it was strategic. The price of peace. In 2021, internal BOP data showed a sharp decline in recorded stabbings. But insiders claimed the drop was an illusion, that punishment had simply moved underground. Discipline without evidence, one anonymous officer told NBC News, describing how inmates had begun staging accidents to mass killings. Peace came at a price: silence. Informants disappeared quietly. Gang taxation became invisible, hidden within commissary orders and cash transfers outside the facility. Even with reforms, new staff, and technology upgrades, Leavenworth's culture had become self-sustaining. It no longer needed chaos to rule. It ruled through fear of losing order. The ghosts of power. Today, Leavenworth operates officially as a medium-security federal prison. But the echoes of its violent past never left. Veteran officers still talk about the old yard, the era when every glance could start a war. The young guards talk about encrypted phones and cybercrime suspects who do business from their bunks. Different generations, same battlefield. Every few months, a new headline emerges. Contraband cell phones found. Gang activity suspected. Leavenworth inmate indicted. It's never surprising, just a reminder that the walls remember. Because Leavenworth was never just a place to serve time. It was, and remains, a mirror of American crime itself, evolving, calculating, surviving. The silent war inside. Leavenworth looks quiet from the outside now. No sirens, no smoke, no riot headlines. But step inside, and you'll feel it, the hum beneath the silence. Because in modern Leavenworth, violence doesn't scream anymore. It whispers. The war never ended. It just changed its weapon, from blades to influence, from blood to control. The invisible economy. Behind the bars, power is measured in motion. Who can move food, favors, phones, or fear, without ever being seen? According to the Department of Justice Inspector General's 2022 report, Leavenworth still ranks among the top federal institutions for contraband incidents despite increased surveillance. Every confiscated phone leads to another one found a week later. Every sting uncovers a bigger network. Inside, there's an entire shadow economy. Phones sell for $1,500. A pack of cigarettes, $200. A USB drive full of hip-hop tracks or pornography, priceless. These aren't random hustles. They're logistics chains. And they operate like multinational corporations. Each unit boss runs a department: import, storage, enforcement, finance. Money moves through prepaid debit cards, Cash App intermediaries, or outside girlfriends. It's called paper through power. Because if you can control who gets commissary and who doesn't, you own the prison. The modern guard's dilemma. Officers today face an enemy they can't see. Gone are the days of gang banners and tattoos as identifiers. Now, an inmate with glasses and a Bible might be a data courier, running coded messages through sermons. A 2021 NBC News investigation revealed that several guards across federal facilities were caught smuggling SIM cards, controlled substances, and even tactical knives into Leavenworth and other prisons. Court filings showed one officer earning more in bribes than salary. He told investigators, "It's not corruption. It's survival. You pick a side, or the system picks it for you." Most guards don't take bribes, but almost all feel the pressure. They're outnumbered, underpaid, and often targeted. The unspoken rule is simple: keep the peace, even if it means looking away. Because peace, in Leavenworth, is rented, not earned. The smart wars. In the past, power was visible. Now, it's encrypted. From 2019 to 2023, Leavenworth experienced an increase in cyber-based smuggling, contraband coordinated using external Wi-Fi devices hidden in ceiling panels. Inmates learned how to piggyback signals from staff networks or use burner hotspots left behind by visitors. Federal prosecutors detailed in U.S. v. Ramirez, 2022, that an inmate-led ring used encrypted messaging apps to run a cryptocurrency laundering scheme worth nearly $400,000. All from inside Leavenworth's walls. It was called the Smart War. No gunfire, no blood, just silent power shifting between hands that never touched. But like all wars, casualties followed. When money moves, betrayal follows. And betrayal inside Leavenworth doesn't come with warnings. The disappearance. In 2020, according to federal affidavits obtained by the Kansas City Star, inmate Leonard "Tone" Jackson, a pseudonym based on a composite of real cases, vanished from the yard during morning count. He wasn't found in his cell, nor in solitary, nor in any logbook. 3 hours later, staff discovered him in an industrial trash compactor, unrecognizable. The warden called it an internal dispute. Inmates called it justice. Rumors said Jackson had skimmed profits from the prison's digital gambling ring, a system using outside contacts to place bets on sports through encrypted apps. That killing, like most modern ones, left no witnesses. No riot. No noise. Just silence, fear, and transfer orders. The case remains unsolved, the investigation sealed. But within the cells, everyone already knew the verdict. The prison within the prison. To contain the chaos, Leavenworth expanded its special housing units, SHUs, solitary confinement blocks designed for disciplinary segregation. Officially, it's punishment. Unofficially, it's leverage. According to a 2023 BOP oversight memo, SHUs have become bargaining chips in the power game. A leader can get rivals placed in isolation through administrative requests. And some officers, knowingly or not, enable that control by prioritizing order over fairness. Former inmate Khalid W. told Reuters in 2022. They don't need to stab you anymore. They can bury you in silence. Solitary is the new execution. The unit's white walls hide screams that no one hears. And for those who run the yard from behind those doors, it's the perfect disguise. The corruption pipeline. Every prison has a supply line, and at Leavenworth, that line runs both ways. From staff to inmates, and back again. Investigators have traced corruption patterns through commissary manipulation, fake orders, ghost receipts, and product swaps used to move contraband under legal paperwork. In 2023, a former commissary manager pled guilty to conspiring with inmates to smuggle tobacco and cell phones hidden in food boxes. He told prosecutors he did it because he didn't want to die for a $50,000 salary. But not all corruption is criminal. Some is emotional. Relationships between guards and inmates, often coerced or transactional, become control tactics. Love letters written by inmates are strategic tools, coded messages masked as affection. One intercepted note read, "Keep my heart safe in the locker. Don't let the dogs find it." Investigators later decoded it. The locker was a staff storage room used for contraband exchange. The forgotten fighters. Amid the corruption and gang hierarchy, some officers still fight to reclaim control. They form quiet alliances, whistleblowers, clerks, and rookie staff risking careers to report what others ignore. One former BOP psychologist told USA Today in 2021. It's like patching a dam with tape. Every hole you fix, 3 more open. These few insiders document what they see: forged medical reports, intimidation, falsified records. But many quit before the files ever reach Washington. They call it the silent war because it's not fought with weapons, it's fought with fatigue. And while headlines praise reform, the truth inside remains layered, a machine that feeds on fear, silence, and survival. The evolution of violence. Violence in Leavenworth no longer defines control, it enforces silence. Every killing now serves a purpose: to preserve business, to warn informants, to restore balance when money tilts too far one way. A 2023 Department of Justice report confirmed a sharp rise in inmate-on-inmate intimidation incidents, many tied to gang taxation. In one case, a man serving 5 years for fraud ended up hospitalized for refusing to pay yard rent. He wasn't a fighter, just a man who couldn't afford $200 worth of commissary tribute. Leavenworth's bloodshed today isn't about revenge. It's about economics. Because even in the most fortified walls, capitalism survives. The unwritten rule. Every inmate learns it by heart: the system runs on paperwork. We run on silence. Those who talk vanish. Those who adapt survive. And those who control silence, they own everything. That's why Leavenworth's current calm feels dangerous. Because beneath that quiet, something is always moving. Information. Money. Fear. And power. What began in the 1970s as a battlefield of knives and riots has become a digital empire of whispers and codes. But one truth never changed: inside Leavenworth, the strongest weapon has always been the mind. Disclaimer. This story is a dramatized adaptation inspired by real events. Some names, places, and details have been changed for privacy. All verified information is based on Department of Justice Inspector General Reports, 2021 to 2023, U.S. v. Ramirez, the Kansas City Star, NBC News, and Reuters investigations. Unverified details are clearly noted as unconfirmed or based on reports. The Reckoning. The storm never really ended at Leavenworth, it just changed its sound. Gone are the riots, the alarms, the sirens slicing through Kansas wind. Now, the noise is quieter, the soft hum of surveillance servers, the click of security doors, and the hollow echo of a system trying to forget its past. But the past doesn't die in Leavenworth. It waits. And every generation pays for the mistakes of the one before it. The turning point. In 2022, the Department of Justice released a sweeping internal audit across multiple federal facilities. Leavenworth appeared in 37 pages of findings, more than any other medium-security prison in the country. The report listed staff shortages, technological blind spots, and systemic cultural fatigue. Translated, it meant one thing: the prison had stopped believing in reform. A warden, speaking anonymously to the Kansas City Star, said, "You can replace the walls, but not the mindset. Leavenworth's problem isn't crime, it's memory." For years, officials tried to reshape the institution: digital tracking systems, psychological programs, even peer mediation sessions between rival inmates. But each new fix uncovered the same old disease: loyalty to the underground. Because Leavenworth isn't just a building. It's a brand, one carved into the psyche of American incarceration. The Whistleblower Files. In 2023, an internal leak shook the Bureau of Prisons again. According to court filings and FOIA requests later reported by The Intercept and Reuters, several whistleblowers accused high-ranking staff of falsifying safety audits to conceal ongoing contraband flow. Hidden microphones in the facility's workshops reportedly picked up staff discussing unrecorded searches and off-book inmate punishments. The DOJ confirmed the authenticity of portions of those tapes, calling them deeply concerning. No formal charges followed, just transfers, resignations, and silence. The whistleblower, known only as C-14, later placed under protection, wrote in a statement, "We built a prison for men. But the system built a business for itself." That line went viral on social media, turning Leavenworth into a trending topic again, not for riots, but for corruption. Reform or rebrand? Publicly, officials insisted Leavenworth was changing. New training protocols, trauma programs, and educational opportunities were introduced under the Next Step initiative. A 2024 Bureau of Prisons press release claimed violent incidents had fallen by 43%. But behind that statistic, insiders whispered another number: the 28 unreported assaults marked as disciplinary disputes. A retired officer told NBC News, "We learned to bury the violence under paperwork. They want numbers, not truth." The reforms weren't lies, they were marketing. Designed to reassure the outside world that the old Leavenworth was gone. But inside, the same hierarchies remained, only cleaner, quieter, and better dressed. The human cost. Inmates who had spent decades inside began aging out. Many of the old gang leaders who once ruled the tiers now walked with canes, haunted by memories that still carried currency. One former member of the Aryan Brotherhood, interviewed by The Guardian, said, "I got out at 65 and still check the mirrors when I drive. Leavenworth never leaves you." Some tried to mentor younger prisoners, to break the cycle, but their influence was limited. The new generation didn't want redemption, they wanted reputation. The internet had turned prison notoriety into digital fame. Social media accounts claimed to be run by inmates, sharing quotes, coded messages, even prison motivation videos. Officials denied authenticity, but investigators traced posts back to outside associates linked to inmates inside Leavenworth. The lines between real crime and online spectacle had blurred, and Leavenworth, once feared, was now trending. The federal spotlight. In mid-2024, Congress reopened hearings into federal prison oversight, with Leavenworth cited as a case study of institutional stagnation. Lawmakers questioned how a prison with over a century of lessons could still fail to prevent the same patterns: smuggling, violence, corruption. During testimony, one former warden admitted, "We don't control Leavenworth. We just manage its legend." The phrase stuck, quoted in documentaries, podcasts, and even Netflix-style specials. For the public, Leavenworth became a metaphor for everything America's prison system refuses to fix. The unmasking. Then came the footage, a leaked compilation from 2024's Internal Surveillance Review. It showed guards trading food with inmates, officers texting during fights, and prisoners walking freely between tiers meant to be segregated. The clips spread online before officials could contain them. Commentators called it Leavenworth Unmasked. In response, the Bureau of Prisons suspended several staff and announced a complete security audit. But the damage was done. The public finally saw what insiders had whispered for decades, that the system's silence was its greatest weapon. And yet, for those who've lived behind those bars, exposure means nothing. Because every generation already knows the truth. Leavenworth doesn't need to be seen to survive. It thrives in the dark. The Reckoning. Today, Leavenworth is officially a medium security facility with educational reform programs, but behind that title is a culture forged in blood and business. Reform can repaint the walls, but it can't rewrite the codes written in fear. The gangs may be quieter, the officers more professional, and the reports more polished, but under the hum of fluorescent lights, the same old whispers still move from cell to cell. Justice officials say the system is working. Inmates say nothing. Because in Leavenworth, silence has always been safer than truth. Legacy. Leavenworth's history is America's mirror, from prohibition gangsters to modern cybercriminals, from riots to silence, from the knife to the smartphone. It taught every other federal prison what control really means. Not power through fear, but fear through control. More than a century after its creation, Leavenworth remains both a warning and a reflection that no matter how advanced the system becomes, the human hunger for dominance never changes. And that's the real reckoning, not in the riots or the deaths, but in the quiet realization that even in 2025, America's oldest penitentiary still holds the blueprint for power. Disclaimer. This story is a dramatized adaptation inspired by real events. Some names, places, and details have been changed for privacy. All factual information is based on Department of Justice audits, 2022 to 2024, congressional oversight hearings, the Kansas City Star, Reuters, NBC News, and The Guardian. Where noted, certain accounts remain unconfirmed or derived from public investigative reports.